Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year. Today, I'm talking to Julia Hobsbawm to learn about simplicity and to pick her brain on her book with the same title, or at least in relation to this, The Simplicity Principle, which she's having right there. Julia is an expert on addressing the challenges we face in times of hyperconnectedness and is the author of several books in relation to this. Her latest book, actually also very fitting and interesting, is The Nowhere Office, which is coming out this February, I think.
That's right.
She's also an entrepreneur and a speaker and has been awarded an OPE for her services to business in the UK. She's also the founder of the Social Capital Network, which is also very interesting to me, which connects brilliant individuals from underrepresented and overlooked ethnic and socioeconomic backgrounds with individuals in business, culture, digital, academic, politics, the public life in the UK. Also outside of the UK, or is it only focused within the
it's mainly focused in the UK. It's very small, I should say, but it's small and well-meaning and gets results.
Yeah, amazing. Well, I've seen some of the companies that are connected to it, and they're no small ones. So
exactly. Yes. Yes.
Hey, thanks so much, Julia, for being here today with me and to share your knowledge and your experience about simplicity.
My pleasure, and my pleasure, and I love your project.
Thank you. Yeah, and actually, it's a very dear. I've contacted you actually already much earlier before to reach out to do an interview because I'm actually very curious about simplicity. It's actually something I struggle with myself quite a bit, and I get overwhelmed with too many deadlines, too many obligations, and I'm always seeking to simplify things, which, in my humble opinion, it's one of the most difficult things to actually simplify complexity. So my first question, it's a rather personal one, because what happened to you, or what triggered you to wanting to write this book, The Simplicity Principle? What was the cause of it? Where did it start?
Well, you know the phrase, physician, heal thyself. I think, like you, I struggled, and to be honest, continue to struggle with the age of overload. I wrote a book in 2017 called Fully Connected, about what I call social health, which is how in a computer era do we have healthy and satisfactory connections and ways of being fit in our lives and in the world that involve, if you like, technology and communications technology, and with it scheduling, and with it teleconferencing, and with it all the things that both make our lives easier but not necessarily simpler. So that was the origin. Is I felt overwhelmed and overloaded, and then I began to be really interested in the idea of not just a management and a business theory, there are lots of those, but in the kind of concept of shape, and whether one could look to nature to inform patterns and shapes that could then be applied as a management idea. So that's what got me started.
Yeah, well, I think we'll get to that, because the hexagon is obviously a part of it, and I see it come back in many of your ventures and your activities.
Yes, the hexagon, I'm wearing it, and I'm rather obsessed with my little hexagon shape, because it's actually an interesting concept. I mean, it's rather than a gimmick. It is one of the most efficient shapes in nature. It is seen in amongst other species, the highly social species of the bee, and the bee can teach us a lot, and many people have written about the connections between humans and bees and superorganisms and so on and so forth. So I just became very interested in two things about the hexagon, apart from its prevalence in nature. One was the symmetry of it. That it is very easy to model against, and the second was that in human terms, it really represents almost the maximum limit of our attention that we can deal with at any given time. I mean, 7 is the cognitive limit, and so I thought, oh, hang on a minute. I've stumbled across a shape that's prevalent in nature, that's represented in one of the creatures that we can take a lot of inspiration from, and that actually represents the number of tasks or, you know, working days of the week. And suddenly the whole question about the number 6, I mean, interesting, you're interested in the number 9, which is, of course, you know, 6 plus 3. I mean, 6 is mathematically, and this is important, really. It's in geometry and mathematics, it's known as the perfect number because it subdivides 1, 2, and 3 into it. And even though I'm the least mathematical person on the planet, I might be other than you, maybe. I mean, you know, I really thought that was interesting, that it's a symmetrical number that can divide and subdivide, and therefore is a fantastically useful organizing shape. Hence, the simplicity principle is really, at its simplest, don't do more than 6 things at once, subdivide into priorities 1, 2, and 3, etc.
Yeah, that's great. And actually, I'll share a personal part from myself, because every year, and I've written about this in my post 22nd, the last one I did on goal setting. And every year around the New Year's time, not before, but also after a few days, I take time to kind of shape my focus for the coming year, for 22. And actually, my theme for today, even yesterday, I had a meeting with 3 of my other shareholders. And I was saying that for me personally, and I also think for our business, it should be more about simplicity. Doing less. I guess less is more, you know, giving more quality and less quantity. So that's really the focus for me for this year. And for that, I'm very interested to hear more about this simplicity principle. And actually, what I've been thinking actually about 3, to really focus on no more than 3 things to do, and even on a daily basis to really focus on doing 3 things right, and 6 for me, it even, but you said we can cut it in half and prioritize 1, 2, and 3, because even 6 for me sounds a bit much. And sometimes from experience, I know that even thinking of 4 things or having 4 priorities at the same time, it's difficult to attend to them all.
I think that's right. I think there's a couple of things. The first is that time is totally vital to us in terms of how we manage it, how we perceive it, how we use it. And quite often time is taken away from our control. The fantasy is that we control it with productivity apps, with schedules, with diaries, and so on and so forth. But actually all we're doing is, to use that phrase, rearranging the deck chairs. We're just moving around units of time that we're often not completely in control of. And one of the things I began to explore in my book, The Nowhere Office, is the way that the pandemic triggered latent feelings about control amongst professional workers. And the truth is, given the chance, working hybrid represents a control over their time. So the other sort of question about simplicity is more meta, really, which is we do need guiding philosophies. So rather than trying to sort of stuff our heads with, I must remember this and this and this and this, and then even 6 is too many. It's more about saying, by keeping it simple, I'm giving my best self. And I'm allowing my team to give their best selves. And I've been writing a lot for Strategy and Business, the PwC owned publication, about the simplicity strategy. And I wrote 2 papers for them that did the rounds virally. One of them was explaining the simplicity principle, which is essentially a version of the book. But the second was a strategy I coined called ACCEPT, which is a 6-letter acronym.
I've read about that, actually. I read about it last night.
And I thought that might be interesting to share with your viewers, which is basically, let's say you are running a small enterprise, whether that's your family and your life or a team, or you're in fact running an enormous enterprise. Everything is different now post-pandemic. Everything is more complicated, not less. Let's just be clear. Simplicity is more needed, not less. What would be the 6 guiding ideas for your business? And ACCEPT stands for align, clarity, collaboration, ease, productivity, and time. And just very briefly, alignment is critical, because if one department over there and one country over there isn't, that's an issue. Clarity is the first simplicity principle. If you cannot reach clarity, which in a crisis is difficult, which in an evolving situation is difficult, but you have to seek clarity. Clarity is totally vital. Let's go back to the bees. The bees are very clear what they're there to do and when. They adapt, they're versatile, but the bee never goes, what am I doing now? And in fact, the pesticides upset the ecology of the bees so that they were confused over what they were supposed to do, and it nearly killed them. So clarity is incredibly important. Collaboration, well, collaboration and communication is a bit of a statement of the obvious, but it's worth stating. You need to communicate and collaborate, especially as we're much less in the same room with each other now. Then the last three of ease, productivity, and time. A lot of business thinking makes a virtue of things that are complicated and difficult. And I wanted to really spell out, I think when things are easy, they make a lot of sense. I think there's a virtue in saying, does this feel right? Does it feel easy? So I kind of almost provocatively wanted to put the word ease into the strategy. Productivity is hugely important, Julius. I think that it's become a little bit popular to talk about what we feel and what we want in our life goals and blah, blah, blah. You know what? We all have to work, and work is all about producing, and work is, I feel there's an alignment I want us to be sentient worker bees, but I want us to be productive. If your goal is not to be productive, then I think you have the wrong goal. But it doesn't mean you can't be creative. It doesn't mean you can't be fulfilled. It doesn't mean you can't be emotional. Productivity is a purposeful thing. And then finally, the point about time, which is, I think if you don't have the right time frame, if you want to lose weight tomorrow, that's not as productive or clever or clear, etc. So I don't know if that's helpful, but simplicity for me is both a very precise following of 6 and so on, but it's also a belief system.
I want to dive a little bit deeper on the ease, because it should be easy, but how can we make this practical in our daily lives or in our work or in our corporation? How can we strive for ease?
Well, the corporation, again, this is something, having written the simplicity, I now think that my book, Fully Connected, followed by the Simplicity Principle, followed by the Nowhere Office, is something of a trio of books that all in the end looks at how does the human being in the world get on with each other and get stuff done in a way that is healthy, socially healthy. And there's absolutely no doubt that the world of work is basically not healthy, is basically dysfunctional, is basically difficult. And one of the big problems is, of course, the complexity of the structures. And so what's really interesting is you look at thinkers like Frederick Laloux with the Teal theory of organization, you look at John Hagel's new book, a lot of thinking is shrinking to simpler, smaller formats, because you can't really make things easy if you need 15 different people's buy-in in different time zones and a hierarchy and a structure that means that nobody really knows who's in control. Nobody so the challenge is in fact not personal so much as institutional. The change is not going to come just because you and I hopefully sprinkle some inspiration to people around us and they go, yes, I want to change. Up there, it's got to change. Do you agree?
Yeah, I would. And I think, I'm blessed to have my own company like you do. So, and I'm thinking about the conversation we've had, because actually we've talked about communication between just 4 shareholders. And communication is an issue. But indeed, what we did is create a really simple structure we will create some really simple measures, and it's really maximum 3 points that we'll check in with on each other on a weekly basis now, which we started doing, but we lost track of it by our priorities and all these other little things. But we reinforce this, and again, it's a really simple and easy method, no complicated structures, and really actually a flat organization, flat communication lines, short lines. And I think it will, the simplicity is a really important part of it, because as soon as we, and for instance, one practical thing that we have, we are working together in the cloud in Dropbox, for instance. And as you know, when you have folders, there's a rainforest of new folders and subfolders. And so one of the things that we also discussed is we really need to trim that down again, maybe even to a maximum of 6 different different sub compartments, and every time there's a maximum of 6 folders, something like this.
Absolutely. These hacks are completely vital.
Yeah.
Pattern, rhythm, predictability, the seasons are seasonal.
Yes.
Nature has pattern and simplicity, as well as obviously blinding, dazzling complexity. So I just want to say that for me, there's quite a difference between simple and simplistic. Simplistic can be reductive, can even be stupid.
Yeah.
Simple for me is about simplicity, is about a sophisticated understanding of what's real and what can be controlled and responded to. So having, for instance, a set time and place, whether that's in the cloud or face-to-face, where everybody meets, where of course you might have exceptions, but the norm is, and this is going to be particularly important, I think, for people in the nowhere office environment of people working virtually, is that if you're going to have a point of cohesion, you say to people in the team, unless you're on holiday, unless you're ill, unless you have a very good reason, in this organization, we have decided for now that this is the time and place that is inviolable in which we all get together. And you can then have complete freedom and flexibility around it, but so these anchor points are very, very important.
Yes.
And at the same time, to design time that has space in it, because the other thing is, of course, when you have a little bit of this and a little bit of that, it fragments the attention. And the problem is, neuroscientifically, we know so much more about the human brain and how we can't cope with too much sensory overload. And so this constantly being on the device and scheduling on the device and parking with the app on the device and being social on the device and sucking up information.
I was going to say it sucks us into the device. There's
right. So you have to be manual, not digital, some of the time. Yeah, that is for sure. Yeah. So for instance, every day for half an hour a day, I go out and I have a walk to a very good coffee shop, and I do not take my device. Yeah. And I force myself to not panic, that my family responsibilities, I have a mother who's under medical supervision, and I could be called at any point, and I have to tell myself, don't panic. And I put in a cascade system, to control the time when nobody needs to be contactable the whole time is actually the other point.
Yeah, that's I think it's now 1.5 years, but I got my company email off my phone. So that's already the separation of where I'm working. It's behind the computer, and on the phone, because it will pull you out at any moment, because I'm working in different time zones also. And then at any point of the day, there can be an email coming in, and it completely takes me away from the present moment.
But that's a really interesting question, because you see, for me, at a practical level, I decided not to do that. I have an iPhone, I have everything in the cloud. Yeah. And then I have the desktop that I broadcast from and do certain documents on. And I went through contortions saying to myself, yes, I'm going to have a weekend phone, and I'm going to this and I'm going to this. Mm-hmm. And in the end, it felt very much to me like the relationship certainly I have had over the years with food. let's put the sweeties away where they can't be touched,
rather
than why don't we think about what we're feeling when we're going for the sweeties? And so so where I've ended up, but the simplicity principle is always about designing the ease, designing what keeps you productive, designing what makes you feel great. So it's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. For me, the simplicity principle is about saying everything's on that device. I need to build in times when I'm putting it away. So my rhythm at the moment is, first thing in the morning, I look at the physical diary, I look at the stuff that's come in, I do admin, and I separate the time between administrative tasks, making appointments, responding to emails, and what I would call focus time, or what Cal Newport memorably called deep work. And so you're physically separating your type of tasks, but you're also not living on the device. So for those of us that are able to think for a living, a lot of what I do is that. I really try to only read academic papers and articles online, but to read physical books. And to, I'm afraid, deface and mark those physical books, which drives my husband, who's an antiquarian bookseller, absolutely nuts with rage. But it's my way of connecting physically to the object. So I think we all need to find our rhythm and our routine. The simplicity principle is not straightforward.
Actually, I think what it's about, and this is also what I've been thinking myself, it's really about creating standards, creating structures and habits. This is also what you're talking about, that make it easy to go through our daily activities, work, motions, exercise, whatever it may be. I think, and that's the beauty of habits, because they take the thinking power and the decision-making power away from us by building a routine. And then that actually becomes available for, as you say, the deep work, the thinking work.
And I love BJ Fogg's work on habits, for example. That's Tiny Habits is a wonderful book. But the thing I think we need to be careful of is that what you can't do is just constantly, as I say, rearrange the deck chairs or shuffle the pack. In the end, if you want simplicity and clarity and ease and productivity and alignment and collaboration and some time that isn't frantic, you probably have to do less or do differently. That's, I think, the big reveal, is that simplicity isn't the magic bullet. It's a recognition that we only have one life, that we have 168 hours in the week, that we sleep or are completely unproductive because we're resting. Not that resting is unproductive, but we can't do for a third of that time. And so we have to choose very, very carefully what we give our attention to, our emotions to. And that brings me on to the work around what I call the nowhere office, which is the pandemic has released a recognition in people. Not everybody has had the luxury. Lots of frontline workers and people who've carried on who have no such luxury. But the 40% and rising percentage of the world's developed economies who work in the service sector, the knowledge workers, those of us that work with our minds and our keyboards, fundamentally, we know we need a reset. The desire for the simplicity principle, the book was published in May 2020, but actually the simplicity principle is coming into force more now in 2022.
But I have a question. You say we have to choose, right? So we have to decide to do less. It's also what I said at the beginning, less is more. Actually, that's my theme for this year. But then what would you recommend, or how can we make a balanced decision or a weighed decision on what to do and what not to do? do you have any tips on this process of decision making? Because especially in this time of overwhelm and continuously new priorities being added to our already long list, how do we decide what to focus on and what not?
Well, the decision is an interesting word. It's in the book, The Simplicity Principle, the accept strategy came later, but the book, the second principle is decision.
Yeah.
Maybe it's even the first principle. You know, deciding and acting is very aligned with clarity.
Yeah.
And actually, the way to decide and to prioritize is to know what you feel.
Yeah.
And quite often in a work environment, again, with bad management, with complex structures, with time pressures, it's incredibly difficult to know what you feel. And quite often people feel, I don't want to know what I feel because I can't do anything about it. I have no agency.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you have to begin with, what do I feel? Do I feel that this project is pointless? Why do I feel this project is pointless? Is it me because it's not actually what I want to do? Or is it because the management or the timeline is no good? So you have to connect with what's real. All good leaders, I don't much like the word leader, but I know we have to use it.
Mm-hmm.
All good leaders have to ask the question, what's really going on? Not the wishful thinking, not the targets, what's really going on.
Yeah.
Only then can you decide. And I mean, certainly as a writer, I'm discovering, I think it's Hemingway's famous phrase of kill your darlings. The amount of times I've had to kind of kill 10,000 words.
Yeah.
And I think, but I love those words. I've worked really hard on those words.
Yeah,
they're not making the point clearly enough.
Yeah.
So deciding is about, I suppose, making a positive out of the negative.
Yeah. I like what you say about knowing what you feel. I think this is really crucial. And I also think that, especially in this time of continuous connection and overwhelm, and we are being pulled away, as you say, some people don't even want to feel anymore. I also like your example of going to the coffee shop without your phone, because what I imagine that does is for your subconscious to have a space and for ideas to come up and for you to stare out the window and just do nothing for a moment. And that's
yes, but the reality is that the pace we live at is so frantic.
Yeah.
That what I find is that really that space is recovery. You know how sometimes when you're going to sleep, you don't go instantly to sleep. Your mind is busy. Your mind needs to settle. I'm not talking about whether you go to sleep with the blue screen or not. I'm not talking about the rules. I'm kind of against having fixed rules. Yeah. But there are some times when I go to sleep, and I'm a big believer in the midday nap, actually, if I can. Yeah. And I notice that it takes me at least 10 minutes to settle. So the truth is that there is, again, a bit of a fantasy that space is entirely creative and productive.
It's not.
That, you know, you walk and you meditate and fabulous ideas, but quite often I'm just recovering. I'm just letting that fizzing feeling of, and I'm not someone, I have no notifications at all on my phone. It's not even that. It's just too many points of stimulation, too many activities. Many of us are very, very busy. And the truth is the technology has made life probably more complicated, not less. Yeah. Let's also be clear about that. So my point is, as long as you build in recovery time, rather than the expectation that, oh, I'm going to be fantastically productive because I'm not walking with my phone, it's more about moving from digital space to physical space that I think makes the difference.
Yeah. But then is there another space where so this is recovery time, actually, it makes sense. I completely see the need for it. But what I also see is the need to do nothing, not only to recover, but actually for things to emerge, you know, for things to show up. Do you have?
Yes, that's where mindfulness is very important. Space even 6 minutes to just sit and breathe and just empty and recover. And out of that can be productive. Yes.
Yeah. We're multitasking, at least many of us are, and I think the majority of us are, even though we know it's not working. And there's, like we talked about, so many distractions. I read in your book, actually, it takes around 23 minutes for us to get back on track after we've been pulled away by a distraction. So 2 questions: how can we stop being lured away and by distractions, and how can we stop falling for the trap of multitasking and thinking that we're productive while we're actually less productive?
Well, I suppose what I'd say is it's a constant set of iterations. Like, there's no perfect. There's no, it's lifestyle, not diet. You switch to a plant-based diet, your problems aren't over. You've still got to make choices. You've still got to figure out what tastes you like. There's no easy solution necessarily, although, as I say, there's a virtue in seeking ease over difficulty. The fact is, our brains do get distracted, and our brains do need, therefore, little breaks. And so the idea that we can just keep going all the way through, everybody knows we can't. And the Pomodoro technique of, I think it's 25 minutes, and, means that, and we're speaking, we're about to finish and it's about half an hour, and then I'm going to get up and I'm not going to immediately be able to do anything else because my brain will be full of this really interesting conversation. And so what I have done in the book, The Simplicity Principle, is recommended that people kind of create time zones in the day. Zones when you are purposefully dealing with email, dealing with writing down. I'm, by the way, a big believer in physically writing things down rather than just digitally. Time zones to do particular things, but also to rest in between. And coming back to the point, so perhaps just to finish, roughly speaking, on average, I'm awake 15 hours a day. Maybe get up at 7 o'clock, and go to bed, I don't know, 11 o'clock, say. 40, let's assume there's a 15-hour window, and 3 hours are getting up and getting your coffee and figuring out and getting closed, and 3 hours are, at the other end of the day. So you have 12 hours a day in which to do stuff. And it's quite an interesting exercise to create a pattern, either day by day or week by week, which is to say, well, I do 3 hours of exercise, and then I have a break, and then I do, and this is where the hexagon comes back in, because as a shape on a bit of paper, it's very useful to design what's that time, is that a 4-hour block in which I do deep work and, take time to stretch after I've finished, is that a time to be Zooming? I don't want to do more than 2 hours Zooms, because it's a terrible thing for your brain to be on a Zoom for more than about an hour, really, without a break. And so designing the time regarding the hexagon or, a block as something you can shape is a very useful exercise. But as I say, if you can drive it from a position of positive embracing of simplicity being a route through this very chaotic, difficult landscape, then, therein progress lies, I think, I hope.
So instead of multitasking and doing everything mixed together, it's identifying time zones and planning the day based on.
Yes, don't just dive in from the middle. No.
Yeah.
Have a little bit of, spontaneity is fine, but not too much.
Yeah.
Okay.
Two more questions. In the absence of clarity, or the absence of clarity, it confuses people, and it also weakens our ability to decide. I also know from experience that I get overwhelmed, as we talked about at the beginning of the time. You have this too, when there's too many things on our plate, there's too many deadlines. Where should we start this process of simplification? We talked about many things, but in practical terms, someone who wants to say, okay, 2022, I want to do things different now. What could they start with in practical terms, apart from, for instance, setting up these time zones? What is the low-hanging fruit in terms of simplification?
Well, I think I've probably said all I can say about the philosophy of it. And the fact is, people have to design their own systems. So I would say I made some podcasts around the time of the book called The Simplicity Principle. The book is available, the articles I've written. I think I can't make it more bite-sized than that, actually. I think people are going to have to figure it out. Is it for them? It isn't for everybody. I live by it. I feel better when I live by the simplicity principle than when I don't.
Yeah. So it's finding your own system, your own way that works for you.
Yes.
I guess that's true for anything. Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe then one thing, what really made a difference for you? Where did you start, and what changed things for you? The biggest game changer in terms of simplifying your life.
I think the biggest game changer was realizing that this stuff matters, that a holistic alignment between what I think and do professionally and intellectually and practically, and how I feel about what I do allows me to make better choices. And I'm talking about but I mean we, because you're never really a solo effort. I work with a distributed network for one of my businesses. I work with teams of editors and book publicists and agents for another side of my work. My family is a collaborative effort. And so I think that if I'm in better shape, then the contribution I make is better, but then I can also help, I hope, develop a bit of a systems thinking that's more modern and fit for purpose, which is these times are different to the times that we had when we were pre-digital. So it's really, to finish, it's really all about being human in a machine age.
And connecting it with how you feel, I think, is important, and also in relation to how you feel together by what you do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
One last question. I'm sorry.
I'm so sorry. I really have to go. I really do have to go now.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well, thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Your time. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. Bye.
Your book. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.